Welcome, Josh, to the wilds of Melbourne. How you been?
It's great. Thanks for having me.
Oh, that's right. So those of you who haven't been following along at home, Josh and I have been causing a bit of havoc out there when it comes to .au. And I was always going to start this podcast with you anyway, but mainly because of the work that you've done with RealAs, which we'll get onto. But then since then, we've had all this direct AU stuff come up. And because you're a former director, I think you obviously uniquely placed to tell us, how the hell did we get here? I mean, why? The thing that amazed me about this, and we'll explain to people who don't understand it soon, but the thing that got me about this is I heard about it after the decision had been made. And I've been in this industry, as long as you, and 25 years or whatever it's been. And for me to miss that is hard. It's difficult for me not to hear about these things. I mean, it felt almost like it was buried. Were you on the board at the time when they made, or did you just left? Or?
So I was on the board which set up a policy panel to consider a range of things, including whether direct.au registrations should be opened.
Yeah.
But I'd left the board once the decision was made after I'd left the board.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So can you just tell us a bit about the background, AUDA? Because most business people I know don't even know it exists until they have a problem with the domain name or something like that. And I say, go here and check out this form.
So AUDA, which is short for .au Domain Administration, is the self-regulatory body. It has endorsement from the Australian government, the federal government, and also has endorsement from the global internet body, ICANN, which is, I won't bother telling you what the ICANN stands for, just Google it. And the purpose of AUDA is to do a number of things. It's to protect and look after the .au namespace. It's to set up a registry and registrar operations, which is code for a wholesaler and a retailer of domain names. And then just make sure that all the relevant parties, all the stakeholders in what makes .au a well-known and a good brand, I suppose not just a good brand, but a safe space is maintained.
Yeah.
And so really Outer has been doing that since it was delegated that authority in 2001.
Right.
And it's been operating, it took over and started operating in 2001-2 to be the operator of .au, which was prior to that only run by one company, which was a business called Melbourne IT. And the delegation was held by a person by the name of Robert Ells, who was then a professor at the University of Melbourne.
Yeah, and back in the day, it used to take us 6 weeks to get a domain name registered. It was horrible. Yeah. And look, he had a big backlog at the time. It was one bloke doing it. And certainly things definitely improved once Outer came into being. And for my part, I was fairly vocal, as you were back in the day, about when we're having all these discussions about, who should be able to get a .com.au, who should be able to get a .net.au, all these sorts of things. And there was a lot of noise. But as soon as Outer came along, it really did start to put structures in place. All of a sudden it became easier to get a domain name. But I just go over it, because this is what a lot of people find confusing. And you talk about wholesalers and retailers. Well, there's wholesalers, retailers, and then there's the great unwashed, which is us. Because to me,
registrars. Good point.
Outer is the wholesaler. They're the ones charging the retailers, like Crazy Domains and Oz Registry and all those places. Am I right?
Well, I would probably.
How does that work?
I would even call Outer the regulator. So they're the regulator. They'll have a registry, which is I would call the wholesaler. So today that's a company called Oz Registry. It's about to change to.
So what they look
affiliates.
at, they manage it on behalf of Outer.
They manage the database of names. So they've got the big database of domain names, and they make sure that they're available to be sold through a whole bunch of different retailers, and we call them registrars. So things like companies like Melbourne IT and Crazy Domains, GoDaddy,
Right.
Uni Registry, you name it, those kind of companies can all go and sell .au domain names by accessing that registry.
Okay, so presumably there's a cost that Outer has to pay Oz Registry at the moment?
Sorry, the registry pays Outer, yes. So there's a fee which Outer collects. So Outer has a fee per domain name.
Okay.
Yep.
Right.
And
okay.
a registry fee. Then the registry then has a fee which they charge registrars, and then there's a fee which registrars charge registrants. So you can see there's just a few layers up there.
So there's 3 levels of pricing, basically.
Yeah,
That's what we're
yeah,
talking about.
basically.
Okay,
Yeah.
so 3 levels of pricing, and AUDA gets the first cut, essentially. So,
And that pricing is something that's transparent. So you can go to the Outer website today. I can't actually rattle you off the numbers right now, but they're published prices.
yeah, right, okay. The thing that is, and the structure of the AUDA and how we got here, there's a board made up, and we have this membership base, and you got on to me, was it 2 years ago? I think you started rattling my cages when you said there's something going on here, and we were doing Beers, Blokes and Business at the time, and you tried to get all of us on board. I think I'm the only one that's stuck. I think all the others bailed because it's a very boring organisation, I got to tell you. I'm sorry, no disrespect, Josh, when you were there, I'm sure it was exciting, but the stuff that they bring out and the things that business has to try to get their head wrapped around, it's just like, I really don't have time for this. But it is so important. It is, and I'm glad you did rattle my cage and get me involved, because the things I've seen happen based on such a small membership are quite extraordinary. Like,
There's literally less than 200 members.
Less than 200 members in something
Controlling
that affects every business in the country.
.au space. It's
And it
really
costs
worrying.
what?
Yeah.
$25 a year for an individual to become a member.
Yeah.
And no one knows it exists, except a group of us geeks. And essentially, to me, Outer has always just been a group of systems administrators. You know, we're a membership group of administrators because we're the only ones that you know have the time and are boring enough to actually find out about this stuff. But the membership is interesting in that we have what are called supply members and we have what are called demand members. So your supply members are your registrars. They're your Crazy Domain, or well, I don't even know they're a member.
So you include in that both the registry, registrars, and even resellers. So people who might even work with a registrar.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so maybe like a web hosting provider might have an agreement with a registrar. So they might say, hey, you know what? When we sell our web hosting packages, we'll throw a domain name in as part of that thing, and they'll have an agreement with the registrar. So
right, so they're your supply members.
So they're the supply side.
And then you have your what we call demand, which is everybody who registers.
Everyone else, basically.
Everyone else who registers.
Yeah. And so pretty much you can, if you're able to register a domain name, then you can be a demand class member.
Right. Do you know what the breakup is? Of what?
It's pretty even these days. Well, actually,
why is it pretty even? That's insane.
So when I say even, there's probably more demand class members. In fact, there are, and there's fewer supply class members. The division of board members is that there is equal numbers of places on the board for both supply and demand class, and there's a number of independent positions. So there's right at this moment, there's one vacancy in demand class which hasn't been filled. And
okay, so the people who register domains don't have a board, are missing a board member at the moment.
Right now.
And that was vacant. Was it last year?
It's been vacant since last year. I believe the Constitution says they're meant to be filled within 3 months. So,
well, it's been longer than that because
right,
I threw my hat in the ring back in November last year, and then
What would you know about domain names?
Yeah, right. And I quickly withdrew my nomination after I put out a video 3 weeks ago, which subsequently got 20,000 views, and then I went to the public forum that they had, and the way I was treated there, I just thought, I don't want to be part of this board because the people, and the board is, and for people who don't know this, the board has undergone a bit of a revolt in recent times. Like I ran for the board, I think it was 2016, and I seconded a bloke on the board, Tim Connell, who got on, and he was running on the same platform that he didn't want .au. We had, I think, Ned O'Meara, who's now on the board. He has a platform. of not wanting .au, and I think Nicole
Murdoch, yep.
also has that position. Is there any other board members that are saying we don't want .au?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean,
But these
I know,
three are all new, right?
But what I would also,
since 2015.
I suppose what I'd say, in fairness to the other board members, in terms of what their views expressed, I know some board members have literally said we're waiting until what we hear. So I know some have said,
okay, so they're reserving judgment.
Yeah, basically, which is fair. I mean, the whole idea of policy panels is to to provide reflection of what the industry, the community wants.
Well,
and it's meant to be reflective of what businesses want, what consumers want. It's meant to be.
It's meant to be, yes.
But,
so out of form this policy review panel. So far we've got at least 3 board members that we know are against this, and they ran on platforms to get elected and were elected on the basis that they didn't want .au.
Yep.
So they're outnumbered at the moment with supply directors, I think the numbers, and then there's some that we don't know.
Independent, yeah.
The thing that troubles me about that is that we're saying that some board members are not reserving judgment. Is that every time I ask a question, and the panel that was formed by called the Policy Review Panel, every time I ask a question of that panel or the CEO, they will only talk about implementation. They will not answer the question, why is .au a thing that should happen? For those of you who don't know, I probably should explain it earlier. It just means that what our proposing, or what they're saying they're going to implement, is you'll be able to register yourname.au as opposed to yourname.com.au. Now, there's a whole raft of problems around that. The first one being that you may not be able to get it. Ada has already told us there's 90,000 or something contested domains. So there's 90,000 organisations out, or no, more than that. It could be as high as 500,000 organisations or something that might have a say in wanting to get this. And you wrote an excellent paper on it, but I'll get back to that. But the other problem with it is that if you registered a .com.au or a .net.au or whatever, after April 2016, you are not eligible to get that .au. And the panel said this is because, they had to have a cut-off period. Otherwise, everyone would be going out buying .com.aus just so they could get the .au. So we've already got problems from the formulation of this. But this panel was put together by the board, the Policy Review Panel, and they held public forums. I went to one in Melbourne, and I got shouted down incredibly. I was just shocked and amazed. And every time I tried to ask a question about why are we doing this? What's the business case? There was no answer. So why is no one answering that? If there are board members that are waiting to see the outcome, or what outcome could they expect if they're not actually getting feedback from members? So,
and therein lies the problem. So in 2016, after I left the board actually said, they agreed with the previous panel's report and said, we are in principle going to adopt and look to open up the .au namespace.
Right.
However, here's what they did say. They did say, we want to go and explore what it would take to implement. Hence why the Policy Review Panel is looking at implementation options. So they were basically saying, the outers are saying right now, right, we are ticking over on, we are moving towards implementation. We believe that's the right way to go, and we need to work out the best way of implementation. The problem is they've missed a step.
Yeah.
And one report which Outer actually commissioned themselves from Deloitte actually said there was a need to do a quantitative survey of the cost and benefits to make sure this whole piece of work wasn't just to feather nests and drive profit for one particular area of the economy. For example, the supply side, which ironically happens to dominate a fair part of the outer board. So, what needs to be doing now? There's no problem with the registry and registrars making money. I have no problems with that at all.
No,
I'm an enterprising guy.
Yeah,
however, we need to address the value side of the equation. So where is the value for businesses?
And that's the thing.
So I'll give you a real example. I was looking at, I found 4 businesses the other day, and ironically, they all have domain names which are titled Acme ACME, as in, like Roadrunner.
Yeah.
There are literally 4 different businesses. One who owns acme.com.au, one owns acme.net.au,
Nice.
one's got all.au, and one's got id.au.
A lot of people don't even know there's id.au
Yeah,
out
it's
there.
like a personal domain namespace. But there's 4 different namespaces, 4 different spaces, 4 different names. So that alone, those 4 different businesses, if they all want to have acme.au, then the cost to them, the minimum cost for them, for each individual business, would be, the legal fees alone would be a couple $1,000 each.
You would think.
So multiply that out by 100,000 names, by the party on each side. So that's actually, in
that case, it's 8,000.
Let's say it's 200. So 200,000 entities times $2,000. There's $400 million.
It's ridiculous.
And then the defensive registration. So if the 3 million odd people want to start registering their domain names, maybe let's say, I don't know, 20 or 30% of those people actually take up and do some defensive registrations. There's times $30 a domain name. That's substantial. There's another $30 million, $40 million worth of spend that people have to spend. It's a tax on businesses. Now, in order to get away from the word tax, which some people have suggested is me being trying to create a scare campaign, it's not.
Well,
it's me saying there's a real expense for businesses. Turn it into something that's valuable, then it will become an investment.
Well,
that
was my platform when I ran it. It says, and if you go and have a look for if you go Google DirectAU registrations, you'll see my page is the #1 result, and it says a new internet tax for business.
That's it.
That you can't call it anything else but that. And those numbers are solid. I mean, it's just like, and you're right, that's the minimum. And like, if it's an investment, well, I mean, look, businesses, as you know, want to spend money on 2 things. Is it going to make me money, or is it going to save me money?
Yep.
So which category does this fall into? Just tell us that.
Yep. It's
not going to save me money. And then you're not even looking at the costs of, like you talk about the investment side of it. Like I get a lot of clients, and when the generic top level domains were coming out, they're getting contacted about .melbourne, .sydney, all this sort of stuff, and they're saying to me, another one. Do we have? And look, we'll make a lot of money out of this. Our business will make good money out of this, because one of the things that we do is site migrations. When we did Pro Blogger last year, we took them from .net to .com as an example. And there'll be businesses that want to go from .com.au to .au if that happens. But it gets back to that value question. Like, yeah, I can make a lot of money out of this, but it's like, I can't tell my clients to sit back and just accept this. It's crazy. Where's the value for them? There is no value. It's just an extra cost.
Well, I would say we're not aware of the value.
Well, no one's told us.
Well, and here's the issue. Outer has failed in its duty to speak to businesses and understand what the potential value could be. So in my true belief is Outer are attempting to rush through this change in order that they don't have to go and consult businesses. Maybe they're fearful that businesses will be worried about it. Now, you and I and others have highlighted and said, you know what, businesses need to be aware of this. And guess what? We're seeing businesses become more aware of this. It's getting now into mainstream media. And if businesses come out and say this is a wonderful proposal and it's going to mean that they're more competitive because of it. It makes because it's what they do in other country codes or whatever the reason is.
Yeah,
that's
show
fine.
us if they've got some numbers.
Show the evidence.
Really
just show the evidence, because it's true that other country codes have tried this.
I'm honestly
surprised. In New Zealand and UK and that kind of stuff, and there's certainly stats out there and other things. So if there's a compelling case, Outer should be in the position to tell it, but I've not seen it.
I was actually quite surprised when I started asking these questions that they just didn't jump on me and say, oh yeah, here's all the data. Here's all the data.
But didn't they do something else? Didn't someone just call you an idiot instead?
No. I went to the public forum. Man, that was fun. And they've got recordings of it, but they're not making them public, ironically. But they wouldn't want to either,
probably because calling you an idiot is probably not smart.
Calling me is I was as stupid as I look. I'm not an idiot. No, let's get it right. Let's be accurate. But I came away from that and I'm thinking, okay, I got locked out of that discussion. They did not want me asking questions about why were you doing this. And then I went and looked at, how they've consulted with business to this point. And that's when I wrote this article. And because I went around and I thought, what are the biggest business groups in the land? I'm thinking, well, Australian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, certainly the New South Wales Chamber, they commented on one of the articles written by Smart Company, and big shout out to Emma. And they were saying, what the hell is this? Why haven't we been told? And then I went and spoke to, I contacted Vecchi, which is the Victorian one. I contacted Cosboa, which is the small business one. I contacted CEDAW, which is a big corporate one, and none of them knew anything about it. And then this is the panel member. Okay, so this is our policy review panel. And I put this up and I said, what's missing here? Peak business body representative to be advised. And then it says the chair will announce the peak business body representative once the position is finalised. The panel wound up its review of for comment last week, and they didn't have a business member. And they've had this since September 2017, and get this, the minutes of the panel, the first ever meeting of the panel, the number one agenda item in the minutes is to appoint this person, and they didn't do it. Now, I was able to contact all of those organisations within a day and get a response.
How much money and time did you spend on that?
Oh gosh!
Did you? Because you must have like a multi-million-dollar budget for that.
Well, it's hard to tell now, Joel, because I buy my minutes in bulk, and it'd be very hard to work out. But I'm thinking at least dollars,
Dollars, yeah.
Probably $10, something
because
like
Outer
that.
has $21 million in the bank, yet they couldn't actually expend anything on contacting these organisations.
This is what gets me with this, right? We live in this age of social media and internet and transparency and everyone.
I mean, you and I have got more attention to this just sending a few tweets out.
Tweets and some shares and some articles, some videos. It's like all of a sudden it's reached Parliament House. All of a sudden it's generated 10 news articles.
I mean, Ed Hughes talking about it in Parliament, like you said.
Ed Hughes talking about it in Parliament. It's just crazy. And like they've had 6 months to organise this and get responses from business, and they
I mean, Cameron Boardman is a very.
Can you explain who that is?
Cameron Boardman is a CEO of Outer, and he's a politically savvy person. He knows he's an ex-member of the Victorian State Parliament. He has,
is he? I didn't know that.
Yeah. So he has, and he's well connected within the Liberal Party, and he knows his way around. He knows how to connect to people. So for someone of his calibre, who was hired to be a connector of people,
that's the thing that gets me.
It really surprises me that someone like Cameron Boardman, who's experienced and absolutely, I would expect to be able to drive into those connections, couldn't do it. We're not asking for someone to be fully knowledgeable on everything to do with the domain name system. We're saying connect to businesses.
What's your opinion?
Connect to businesses.
Yeah, let's just
and Outer's failed. Outer's failed in its core purpose, and this goes back to the fundamental reason why Outer was allowed to be a self-regulatory body, was that it would consider the views and opinions and be responsive to the needs of the broader community, and it has failed at that at its worst.
Well, okay, let's just take that back a step, because it was working really, really well. And the reason I say it was working really well is because I didn't hear about it. And as far as I'm concerned, if I don't hear about it, it's not broken. Awesome. And then it was probably a couple of years ago when you contacted and said, hey, you might want to become a member. And I was hearing of all of these people leaving Outer, and some staff, but some incredible talent that had been there for years and years and years. And one of them I actually knew. And she was talking to me and she said, it's that, and it seemed to her, and look third hand or second hand or whatever, that there was a clean out happening of staff. And I don't know why that is, but I rang them up the other day and they were a bit flustered trying to get to all the complaints that they've currently got on there. And I kept getting told, we'll get back to that complaint in 24 hours. It's been a week now, I haven't heard anything back. I mean, this is Australia's domain space. What, if any, I mean, I don't want to get into the politics of it necessarily, but to me, as an outsider looking in, it feels like there's been almost like the fox has got into the hen house, and we're seeing people who are going to profit from these. Because the only logical explanation that I can see is that this is a cash grab. I can't see, because in the absence of anybody else presenting any business case for it, I can't see how it could be anything else except a cash grab. So, I mean, I know I look at Outer now since then, and I'm thinking, it's broken. There's something wrong with it. Now, I know a lot of people have called out to say, oh, the government should take it over. I think that would be a bigger disaster. I think it has to be self-regulating, but this model is not working. And the reason the government should not take it over is because we don't want the government in control of Australia's internet, regardless of who is in power. That's a bad idea. And having fought internet censorship in 1998 and 2008, I know that government would do anything to get their hands on and be able to control anything and to say, no, that website should be switched off. We don't want that. Have you had any discussions or thoughts about the current structure and whether it's working or not working?
I mean, there was absolutely a change in both the board.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of different board members who changed. You know, I left the board, and a number of other people left the board. The chair, previous chair, but Tony Staley, a previous Liberal politician, was ousted as the chair of Outer. Another chair came in. He subsequently, down the track, recently that chair was ousted by the members, funnily enough.
Hey, that's right, we did that.
Stuart Benjamin. What was interesting is I wrote a piece on this at the time. I calculated about 67 years of experience which walked out the door.
I read that article.
Either through being pushed or just people going, I'm out of here. So
I'm out of here.
I'm out of here. It's audacious.
Oh, that's the title of the podcast. I'm out of here.
Out of here. That's it.
Sorry.
But it's anything like that is going to cause you're going to lose a whole lot of corporate memory, and so
intellectual capital.
Yeah, intellectual capital. So that would be tough on any organisation. Outer is not a big organisation. Doesn't have a lot of people, and certainly it's I think it's still finding its feet now, even though it's been 2 or 3 years since that kind of happened.
So why have they're not a big organisation. I mean, why do they have 21 million cash in the bank? That seems kind of odd.
I think there are some good rationale for having some money in the bank.
Yes.
So having
I would agree. I would agree.
So, and this has been publicly stated in the past. So having things in the bank for contingency purposes, when you're running critical infrastructure that needs to be up all the time, and maintain maintain that to a perfectly good service level, and also in the case out in the past is
but they're not running any of it.
Well, no, but they.
But in case I was registry or someone says
exactly.
we need to put on extra name servers or whatever it might be.
Exactly. So I won't go into the. I can't share because of my confidentiality requirement regarding a previous board member about what contingency is available.
Josh.
Just us, not the internet. Hello, internet. But suffice to say, there is a requirement to have a reasonable cash balance in the bank.
Yeah, no, fair enough.
Equally, Outer has taken a proactive approach when there's been things in the past where consumer perspective. So take for instance, there was some invoicing issues which were not invoicing issues, marketing notices.
No, I got sued. Sued over one of those.
Marketing notices which were.
They looked like invoices.
Which the ACCC said looked like invoices. The Outer joined into the thing, joined into this piece of work. In fact, I produced a lot of material which helped support this case with Outer, and some of that actually ended up into the case law. So that was something that was quite active there. Would be many of the board members right now wouldn't be even aware that occurred, and that Outer took that approach and was quite a strong consumer and business advocate, and they probably wouldn't be aware that I was involved in that actual specific case as well.
Was that the very early one? There was one where I got...
That was 2003 to 5, and there was quite a lot of material.
There was a bit earlier one too where I got the spammer sued me. But we're mates now. I've forgotten his name. Sorry, but we're connected on LinkedIn. But so there's no urgency that they need a big wad of cash. And there's nothing. I mean, there's nothing to say, gosh, we better do some fundraising. Let's have .au. That can't be a reason.
Well, I would say that Outers no.
It's not like a business saying we need a new product range, guys.
Outers, unless they've been spending like the cows come home on, I don't know, expensive consultants or something else. They're not. They're certainly not in any need of funds themselves. Has the industry changed from a domain name point of view? Are we seeing slower growth for, say, .com.au and other registrations? We are, but that's no reason just to go, let's go and
start a new one. Create false demand.
And in fact, I was talking to another friend today who's outside of the industry, and I said, and I was talking about the problems that we're having in .au at the moment. And I said, let's just put .au aside for a second because it's not a greenfield environment. You're setting it up, and the majority of the issues we're discussing are about the conflicts between existing brand holders who happen to have domain names. If we had let's just pretend we had a new domain name called .oz, OZ. Now I know that's not technically possible, but just pretend we had it. And Outer's job was to go out there and sell this new domain name to people. Sell that.
Exactly. Sell it to me.
Sell it to me.
And
I bet you'd be really hard. The reason why...
Do your best, Jordan Gisbert. Come
the
on.
The reason why it's easier to sell .au is because it has intrinsic brand value. And why? Because there's 3 million registrants who already sit under all the second levels. And they're the ones which are the primary targets to register at the third level to register at the second level.
Yeah.
And the majority of people will be defensively registering, and then unfortunately, here's the big worry. Let's get on to the next topic.
Well, no, before we get on to that, but this gets back to the cash in the bank, and one of the reasons I asked that question is because you're right, sell it to me. What's the reason for it? But my concern is, and this was said at the public forum, and because I said, you're devaluing .com.au by doing this, by introducing this. And two of the registrars there and the chair of the panel all said to me on the day, well, .com.au domain names have not decreased in sale. I said, that's because no one knows what you're doing. And collectively they said, oh, yeah. And it's like, and then they said, but we're going to have a big education campaign.
After.
Hello. And so to mine, it's like, well.
If anyone's wondering why Jim and I are doing this thing right now and why we're talking to Mumbrella and all these other things, is because we're your education campaign. In fact, are we going to send a bill to Outer for this?
We should.
21 million. This is going to cost 21 million
education program.
We're doing the education campaign.
Stick with us. But it's like you're doing an education campaign after it's implemented. So you should have spent that money first. But what does that do to the value of the existing .com.au domain holders? All of a sudden, we're getting this competition between the two. And on the day, and this is one of the things that kept irking me on the day, and was that, it's only going to be, $50 or whatever. It won't be terribly much. And hey, you as a business owner, you can afford that. It's not a lot. And I'm like, you know what? We're pretty tired of these little costs everywhere and everything else. And the other thing was that, there's just an assumption that we'll pay. And for most of us, we'll have to, because we don't want to lose our brand.
So the implicit, the implication there is that your brand name, your domain name and brand is only worth the cost of the registration.
I know. I've been saying
Let's say
this,
it again.
and I said
your brand name, according to people in the industry, your brand is worth $40, $40. So if you're
you're selling your business,
so let's take two examples: realestate.com.au, carsales.com.au. Both have massive intellectual property and goodwill associated with their domain names.
Yep.
They've spent, you see them all the time. You see these domain names appearing on all their advertisements, on outdoor media, on all their digital media, radio, you name it. That's how they're known. their search engine rankings, everything is built off their domain name. To suggest that their domain name for those organisations and many other like it, even the small plumbing business, is worth $50 only, is just a joke.
It's just
insane.
insane.
This is why the lack of business consultation by Outer will be Outer's downfall and is Outer's downfall. And unless that is corrected, then good luck Outer managing this space.
Someone asked me yesterday. They said, "Well, how close do you think it would?" And we're quoting the Gandhi quote earlier because we're both under attack now. And I said to Josh, well, as I said to someone else, I said, Gandhi said it best. First they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, and then you win. And we're in stage 3.
We're stage 3.
We're stage 3.
Yeah,
they're
going us.
They're really coming.
The anonymous
right?
trolls. The whispering campaigns, we appreciate that. It's fantastic.
It's great. Get
we
the
like
word
that.
out there.
Get the word out there because
that's what we want. We just want discussion.
The more you say that stuff, the more you look like a goose. So
I know, and they attack us because it's sort of like, hey, don't look at the message. Forget about the message. Look at these guys.
Yeah, that's right.
They're bald and one's got a funny beard. So, but the whispering campaigns and everything else aside, I don't really even care about that because, as I said to someone yesterday, all we have to do is get this message out to as many domain owners out there in Australia as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And
accompanied by this little thing starting with an F. Facts.
Yeah, but even if you just tell a business, and you can read any of the comments on any of the articles, any of the videos, they all have a similar theme in that. What a waste of time. This is just a grab for cash. It's just the same sentiment. And that's what Ed Husick said in Parliament. But, so I guess if you want to have... I'm back and forth with the Prime Minister's office at the moment about the cybersecurity angle, because that's real. So one of the problems...
So can we talk about that?
Yeah, let's talk about that. Yeah. So a couple of things that I see with it are phishing and also just real data loss. Like we saw with NAB earlier this year, where the National Australia Bank, they revealed that in 2012 they'd sent the details of 60,000 account users to the owner of a porn site in the US because they'd messed up a domain name. Now, I can mount a whole bunch of arguments to put in place policies in a business to show that doesn't happen or whatever. But once you introduce a new namespace, you're adding risk. You're going to have more of that. You will definitely have more of that because what happens is, for those of you who don't know, usually with a domain name there's a catch-all address. Some people call it the wicket-keeper address, which is basically that if this recipient doesn't actually exist, well, we're just going to send it to Josh because he owns the domain name. So there's a lot of that goes on, and we all get, people who own domain names and they've got the mail set up for them, we all get a lot of that sort of mail. So that's just one. But you brought up a very good one about, the phishing and the...
Well, one I raised the other day, there was a discussion going on between myself and some current Outer board members on LinkedIn the other day, and I was speaking
We'll put the link in the show notes.
Yeah, we'll put this link in the show notes, and I was speaking to Erin Karabartak, who's the deputy chair of Outer.
Oh, thank God. It's the first time I've heard his surnames said out loud. Sorry, Erin. I've only ever known to spell it, not say it.
I was talking about an example of saying, what happens if, say, the domain name, and I made a fictitious one up. I said, what if bank.com.au, what if someone goes and registers under the new top-level.au name, bank-com.au, and does something dodgy with it? And the response from Erin was, well, that's fine, Josh. Bank is a reserved word. That's fine. We've already catered for that. And I said, cool. All right. Let's go to the next option then. Now let's make that word a real bank. So what about this option then? What about if that's now nab-com.au or westpac-com.au or cba-com.au or anz-com.au? How do you deal with that? Crickets.
Nothing.
No answer.
And
I'll tell you the issue. This is nothing against Erin, but Outer is built off a complaints-based policy. And Jim just mentioned a second ago about how they're backlogged. Outer responds when there's an issue, not preemptively. And so if
is that by design?
That's the way they're set up. So it's basically to say, hey, it's more designed for, hey, there's a trademark infringement or something. Or there's some reason why I want to complain about someone having a domain name which shouldn't. But the key thing of this is that it's after the fact, not before the fact. So what happens here is a registrar could take the registration for someone going, I want westpac-com.au. Which is obviously a very well-known brand, and then someone could potentially, a bad actor, someone registers that in bad faith, a bad actor, a hacker, could go and use that for bad purposes, and then by the time Outer gets onto it and does something about that registration, too late. Whatever that bad actor did, that hacker, has been done, and they've moved on to the next name. And the problem is, here's what's happened. The bad actor, that domain name registered in bad faith, relied on the fact that the end user understood and believed that they were accessing westpac.com.au, but it was really westpac-com.au. And this is something that the security world and brand world, not only the security world, will be up in arms in. And this is not just about banks. This is everyone. MYOB, Xero, this will be any of your brands. I mean, who's to stop me registering? Let's go back to a big brand again, realestate-com.au.
Yeah, but it might even be, you might even just go and register a domain name like secure or paid.au, and then you might just set up a whole series of subdomains. I mean, there's a whole bunch of, so you might have like myob, you might get an email that says myob.secure.au. And you think, oh, well, that looks secure. Because it's just this confusion of the namespace that we certainly don't need. And if they think we do need it, please tell us what the business case is, because I can't think of a reason. So anyway.
.au has, one of the real benefits of the .au space today is it has very well-formed policies. You register a .com.au or .net.au name if you're a commercial business organisation. You register a .edu domain name if you're an education.
It's part of the brand.
You register org.au if you're or ASN.au if you're a non-profit or association.
And when you see that, it's instant recognition.
And gov.au for government. The minute we introduce .au and second levels, you dilute all those second level spaces and you basically reduce them to rubble.
And that will happen, but not the only thing is that you won't know by looking at a .au if it's a business, if it's a school, if it's a local council, because this was one of the things that was brought up, was that you will be competing for your domain name with so many other owners of domain names, and that will include local government, it will include federal government, it will include state government, it will include every educational organisation out there. All of these people may have a claim, all these categories may have a claim on your brand, right? And that didn't happen with .com.au. And it's just such an easy, recognisable thing, isn't it? You see .gov.au, I know that's what I'm looking for. It's a government site. And this will it's going to affect people in the search results because the click-through rates will go through the floor. SEMrush did a study last year showing that top-level domains get clicked through, like the generic top-level domains like .travel, .melbourne, get clicked on less in the search results because people don't know what they are. And that's when I suggested at the public forum, people might misinterpret what .au is, and someone said, well, what? What do you think they're going to misinterpret it for? I said, I don't know, Austria. And that's when I was told I was stupid as I looked. And one of the panel members, and this just says it all for me, one of the panel members at the time said, oh, .at is very different to .au. I mean,
how would anyone even know .at
I would have had to look it up, right?
So what's interesting there is that's groupthink. That language being used there is the language you hear when you get a lot of people who talk to themselves all the time and they don't go out and consult.
Yeah,
and that's the point of this conversation now.
Exactly.
On the search stuff, I know there's some stats that I quoted when I did my master's thesis, which said that people on average, when they're looking at search results, spend about a quarter of their time looking at the domain name. So this was a Microsoft study on. So Microsoft did a study on search results.
Bing's a bit different.
No, not on Bing. No, across all search engines.
Yeah.
It wasn't just Bing.
Well,
but they spent a quarter of their time looking at the domain name.
Have a look at your mobile search results. What's front and center just underneath the page title? It's the domain name.
Yep.
And Google's done that for a reason. Google has made that domain name visible for a reason. So if it's not immediately recognizable what the link is that you're going to, you can see the domain name of the site that you're going to. So it's really important from a usability, from a user experience perspective. And when we talk about with SEO that it's affected by brand and the user experience, but the user experience starts in the search results. And we know that lower click-through rates means that you're probably going to rank lower than the sites that are getting higher click-through rates, because Google sees that the users want those results more. So, and if you switch to one of these, this is just another risk that you're going to have, apart from the fact that you might lose all your search traffic if you do the transfer or the migration badly. But even if you do decide to brand at .au for whatever reason, I don't know why, but let's just say that you came up with a business case by yourself, why you thought it was a good idea. You'd put all the cost in for the signage, new logo, all that sort of stuff, new domain. If you then went and switched to .au from .com.au, most businesses would lose probably 40 to 50% of their search traffic for probably 4 to 8 weeks.
How do you know that, Jim?
I've done it several times.
Right.
And
that was a Dorothy Dixer.
Sorry. But one of the ones I did was my own site, right? And I wouldn't have trusted anyone else to do it.
Aren't you an idiot?
Yeah, I know. But we've got a small button. Well,
sorry, I just called you an idiot.
No. It's fine. You wouldn't be the first. You won't be the last. And probably not even today. But we went from .biz, because we've been on .biz for 20 years. Because when I first registered, I couldn't get a .com.au because Outer wasn't formed yet and all the rest of it. But I then, when Outer came into being, I then got the .com.au. But we're only ever using that for email, and it was our major email account. So finally, I bit the bullet last year because I knew .com.au had a stronger brand than .biz, and now they're talking about doing this. It's like, really? You don't know what you're doing. You're taking a sledgehammer to this beautiful thing.
Hang on. So just let me get this straight. Why are we even doing this video? You're going to make a fortune out of this. You can basically help all these businesses transfer their sites. You're going to make you and every other SEO can make a fortune.
Yeah, every other SEO company, anybody that does web consulting is going to make a fortune, right?
Right.
And we already rank for direct AU registrations because it just sticks in my craw.
So why are you against this then?
It's wrong. Not everything's about money,
right, okay, fine.
And look,
principles.
Well, look, to me, the internet is for me, and a lot of people have disagreed with me. Hi, Mark Pesci. That to me, it's the free market in its purest form. In that, unrestricted, and I know we have restrictions on the networks and those sorts of things, and we can talk about what's the thing in the US that just switched off? Sorry, it escaped me. We'll come back to that. Preferred data, what's it called?
Net neutrality.
Thank you.
Yep.
But for me, I've always been very passionate about it because it's the only space where a business could ever just get on. And it didn't matter who you were. You didn't have to go and get a license for a website. You could just get up and get one running. You didn't have to ask permission to publish something. You could just get online and get going. Now, there's a lot of bad that comes along with that. But let's face it, there's been a hell of a lot of good. And the other thing is that online, on the web, with business, it doesn't matter if you've got lobbyists or cronies. Your app might still suck, and the crowd is just going to move. And it's not like, we're forced to only have 5 free-to-air TV channels because they have to buy spectrum from the government and licenses to broadcast, and it's so expensive. So we're limited to the amount of broadcasters that we can have. Online, there's none of that. It's like, you want to be Huffington Post, you can start up tomorrow. And so
the barriers to entry are low. Yep.
Yeah, to me, it's so important to protect that for innovation and creativity and growth and of ideas and sharing of ideas. And when I see people doing stuff like this, and it just, to me, simply looks like a grab for cash, it's just wrong. We're damaging it.
So I want to play devil's advocate for a moment. Some of the arguments I've heard from some in the industry is that opening up .au will give people more choice and more opportunity to innovate. So how do we respond to those kind of questions? What's the
Well, we get a lot of these statements without data behind them, and we have a saying in here, which is don't bring an opinion to a data fight. It's like, what do you mean? Like, I asked this at the thing, and they were saying, oh, well, .au's got a good brand. I said, no, it hasn't. .com.au's got a good brand.
Yeah.
And they were talking about...
in fact, you're right. It's interesting because you see net.au sliding. You see, you look at the growth that's happening is under .com.au.
Yeah. And the thing is it's like, well, what do you mean by more choice? More choice of what? What? I don't understand that. I see, and if I can't understand it, and I've been working in the business for a long time, how's someone who doesn't work in the business but runs their own business meant to take time out?
I would be curious to flick that question back at those who are asking that question to us and say, right, now let's assume that all the people who currently own any domain name under the current structure got their name reserved under the second level of .au and didn't have to pay for it ever. Do you still support the idea? So in other words, more choice, shorter names is all about new people who aren't currently in the space. Do you support it now?
Right, okay, so I'm saying it's only for new registrants.
Because that was one of the arguments that was given. One of the arguments was
still
given...
confusing.
No, but just for a second, just put aside all the issues about contested domain names and how we'd allocate them. Just pretend for a second that we just reserve everyone who's got a third level domain name under .com.au, net.au, whatever. They've got them all reserved. They don't have to pay for them. They just come as an add-on. They're just a thing. You're the .com.au, you get the .au. So stuartmedia.com.au and .au all come as a package now. Then the question is, those same people who are arguing that it allows more innovation, does that still hold true?
No, it doesn't.
Because I would suggest there's probably not enough market, because I would suspect they probably won't say this to my face or your face. They probably wouldn't even say it through an anonymous troll on one of the forums, is that there's not enough market to drive that extra growth. In fact, I've even seen people saying the market size is the same.
Yeah, so basically, if that's the case, then you've got to say, well, the only reason for doing this is to get direct registrations, defensive registrations,
That's
right?
It.
And that's
where the growth will come from defensive registrations, not from innovation and choice.
This is sorry, a little meme behind there. So this is a statement I read on a forum today, and I'll read it out for you for those who are listening and not watching. And this is from someone who's obviously in the registrar industry. They're anonymous, rightly so, because they wouldn't want to say this with their real name. It says, when you currently have people paying $150 for 2 years when they can register a domain name elsewhere for $25. So now the only place I know that was charging, and I don't know whether they still do, Melbourne IT used to charge $134 for 2 years, but there were other places charging $25. I don't think cost is a major issue. It's a tiny cost for any business. And it's like, no, it's a tiny cost for any business. Yes, it is.
The smart consumers, registrants, know where to shop around, know where to buy domain names.
Yeah.
The crazy domains, the GoDaddies, even Net Registry with their pricing structure all have good competitive deals, and people can know how to pay and buy competitively priced domain names. And to one of the other people who made a comment on my LinkedIn thread the other day, they said the real opportunity is actually in services, which sits on the back of domain names. So that's fine. So why do we need .au again? Anyway.
Yeah.
So it's hard to have an argument's the wrong thing. Have a data-based discussion when only one side brings data to the discussion.
Well, I tell you what, the chair of the panel of the public who's doing the policy review, he said to me at the public forum, and because I said to him, I put out that first video, and he said at the public forum it was incorrect and misleading. I asked him to correct it in front of everyone. Please tell me, I want to learn. I'm here to learn. I'm here to tell my viewers and my clients what this is about. They didn't correct it, but then after everyone had gone, I went up to him again. I said, please send me some points, and I just want to know. And he said, yeah, I will. And he said, oh, I'll come on your show as well. I said, well, you're welcome to any time and come on here and discuss. And that's an open invitation to anyone from Outer who wants to come on and discuss this here, because that's all we're pretty much asking for in the first instance is, can we find out more about this? Because to me, it feels like they're coming up to us at the moment and they're saying, okay, how do you want to be taxed? I'm going, whoa, what? Can we back up here for a second?
The train has not left the station.
Yeah, well, what's this tax about? It's like, why? Why? So, and look, I can see a lot of problems with it. I know it's been done in other countries, but that in and of itself is another search threat. You're going to have similar matching domain names, and we know that having a keyword in your domain name helps you rank. While all of a sudden you might have had a .com.au, well, you might be going to compete now with the .au. It's going to mean more exact match keyword domains that are coming up, and you're going to compete against these, and it's going to affect business. But I think we've talked AU out. I want to talk to you though. A really reason I got Josh here. How long have you got? You got a bit longer? I don't know what the time is.
Oh yeah, why not?
Yeah.